Welcome back. Rebecca and I are super excited to be here for week 3 of our education series. So I know we've talked about weight loss resistance, things that might make it harder to lose weight now when maybe things have always worked before, but now something's just a little different. Everyone kind of reaches that point at some point in their life where they're like, wow, what used to work no longer works. So we talked about that a lot in week 1. If you haven't seen it, make sure you check out that video. We also talked about the gut and liver connection and how that can be really helpful in overall health, in addition to weight loss. But today we're talking about a super hefty topic, stress and sleep, and how that can affect, of course, not only your overall health, but your weight loss as well. And I think for as seemingly easy, right? Manage your stress, make sure you sleep. Those seem like really easy things to do. Certainly they are more tangible than improve gut health or improve your liver health. But for my clients, and I'm sure Rebecca's that she's worked with as well, they're the hardest for people to take action on because stress is everywhere. Stress is, and we're going to talk about it in a couple of slides, but it's not just work stress or spousal stress or financial stress. Stress is all encompassing in our life. And it's so important to realize how important it is to manage your stress and to focus on your sleep for your longevity, for health, and for weight loss as well. So super excited to dive in.
Yes. And also on that, I feel like so many people feel like there's so many stressors, like it's almost overwhelming and they're just like, well, it's out of my hands.
Yeah.
And yes, there are certain life situations, like if you're a caregiver to your parents, if you're, different things that you can't control. What Julie and I want to help with is really helping you systematically address what you can control, because we all have things in our lives that are stressors that we can't change, but
Yeah.
I feel like there are always opportunities,
Yeah.
whether we like
Yeah.
it or not. There's
Yeah.
usually things that we can tweak, we can swap, we can improve,
Yeah.
a lot of different stressors. And then that makes you have so much more grace and energy and ability to handle the stressors you can't change.
Mhm.
So just to encourage you guys, because I know this
Yeah.
is like kind of depressing to be like, oh my God, all the stressors. But yeah, just kind of like that mind shift change of what can we work on, what can we reduce, and that frees up so much more ability in the areas you can't really change. That's reality.
Yeah.
So
And Rebecca's totally right. And just to let you know that we are not sitting here in perfectly peaceful homes, environments where nothing goes wrong, right? And we can have, 8 hours a day of breath work. I have 4 kids. My youngest has a pretty significant special needs. Am an entrepreneur. Rebecca's an entrepreneur. So we have real life stresses and we just try to do our best every day. So
absolutely.
whatever you're going through, we get it. We're quite often in very similar situations. Okay, so stress. Stress is the number one causal factor for illness, for anxiety, for disease. If people say, I want to be healthy, and all they're focusing on is their food or their exercise, and they're missing stress, they're missing a huge component of health. I mean, you can see here, stress contributes to 50% of all illnesses. That's huge. And that is when we talk about what's in your control and what's not in your control. A lot of times people will say, like, I'm genetically predisposed for this illness or genetically predisposed for that. But stress is 50% of all illnesses. And I really want people to take that in and to realize this is not just a pleasant saying on a poster board of a sunrise where it says manage your stress and breathe. This is actual important for your health, for your longevity, and to keep illness
Mhm.
at bay. It's a real tangible thing that we need to work on
And
more.
it's not selfish
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
try to work on
Yeah,
reducing your stress load or
yeah,
asking for help or having your me time or whatever. Like it's
right.
not selfish. So
Yeah,
hopefully
yeah,
this kind of clears that up a little bit.
yeah. I'm sure we've all heard the old adage of put your oxygen mask on first. Like that's what the
Yeah.
airlines tell you to do if you have a small child. You have to put your mask on first. And
Yeah.
believe me, my family knows it. When I'm stressed, if I don't take a little bit of time for myself during the day, nobody wants me around. So it is beneficial for everybody, for me to get a chance to breathe, to be alone, to just
Yes.
to have that me time, because it does impact everybody. Okay, so what most people think of as stress, what we kind of talked about in the beginning, jobs, kids, in-laws, finances, traffic, marriage, divorce, parenting, and those things are all stress. But by only thinking about those things, you're really missing a lot of other major stressors that you do have control of and you don't want to just ignore. So things like mental and emotional stress, things like fear, worry, even excitement, anxiety, relationship, lack of purpose, just negative perceptions or having a bad attitude. All of those lay into your stress bucket, that mental and emotional stress bucket. There's also physical stresses, things like traumas, even smaller traumas. People talk about the big T traumas and the little T traumas. Both of those can affect your stress bucket. Physically, like fractures, muscle injuries, weaknesses, nerve compressions. If you have a job that you use the same muscles over and over again, and you have like a repetitive injury, an overuse injury, that can be very
Or
stressful.
sedentary, right? Like
Oh yeah,
sedentary is a stress because your
yeah,
circulation is less
yeah.
and
All of
oxygen.
us that sit behind our
Yeah.
computers all the
Get up,
time.
move around. Mhm.
Exactly, exactly. And Rebecca mentioned being sedentary, but also over exercise. That can also be a
Yes.
major stressor on the body. And you're going to see that with one of our client case studies here in a second. And then a very, very big bucket, which I'm sure we're kind of all aware of. And sometimes I know myself, I like to put my head in the sand because you're like, oh, I can't, like, there's chemicals and toxins all around me. What am I going to do? Right. Especially when I look at my girls' Christmas list and it's like Bath and Body Works this and Bath and Body that. And I'm like, no. But
Nope.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So the big common ones that we think of, pesticides, herbicides, GMOs, recreational drugs, chemicals, metals, radiations, EMFs, but even things like, parasites, bacteria, viruses that we're exposed of, all of that those are stresses in your bodies. But then there's also what I think are kind of the overlooked ones, right? Inflammatory foods, alcohol, caffeine, blood sugar imbalances, even prescription medication, antibiotics, over-the-counter medicines, exogenous hormones, sleep deprivation, lack of exercise, overexercise, allergies, too much food, not enough food. All of those are stresses on the body. So again, not trying to overwhelm you that, maybe we just made your stress go up because you think, oh, I thought I had like marriage stress and now I've got, Bath and Body Works lotion stress. But just awareness is power, right? So being aware of all these stresses and then essentially why it matters. Why are you telling me this? This is life. What can I do about it, right? Stress matters because we've talked about cortisol before, right? Cortisol is that classic stress hormone. It's going to be up in times of stress. And remember, your body doesn't know whether it's being chased by a bear, whether your teenager's annoying you, whether your parents are sick, your boss is getting on your nerves. Maybe it's just the makeup you're putting on your skin, lack of nutrition, your diet. Those are all stressors to your body. So cortisol is going to rise. And when cortisol rises, it tells all the other hormones to take a back seat because it's perceiving an outside threat. So when it thinks you're going to die because of a bear, it doesn't really care about your current immunity, your digestion, or detoxing, right? Everything else takes a back seat. Cortisol is in charge. And that's why those other processes all slow down. Also keep in mind that cortisol is naturally rising as we age through that perimenopause and menopause process. So in addition to, I personally feel like our lives get a little more stressful the older we get, our biology is also adding that stress. And it's causing all those other very, very important processes to slow down and take a backseat, the immunity, the digestion, and the detox. So that is why stress matters. So chronic stress. So again, one quick thing to point out is that stress, it's impossible to avoid all stress. But actually our bodies are okay functioning. We're built to function with little acute stresses, right? You see a bear, you run, you get a chance to recover. That's how our bodies are made to function. But unfortunately, in today's day and age, we are under chronic stress. It's stress after stress after stress after stress. And that is not good for our health. It's not how our bodies are meant to function. So here's just a list of things that can start to really happen with chronic stress. So we can see adrenal dysfunction, sluggish liver, detox problems, leaky gut. We talked about that a lot. Digestion, hormone, inflammation, blood sugar, weight gain, all of those things are the effects of chronic stress. And keep in mind, we mentioned it before, but inflammation, that's an immune response. So when you're short on sleep, and we're going to talk a little bit about sleep here in a second, you're going to produce cortisol also to keep you going. When your body is in fight or flight mode, that is that stress response. So we really need to, when bodies live in that mode, they become unable to manage that inflammation. Inflammation can also cause some muscle atrophy. And you're going to see later, we're going to be talking about the importance of muscle as well. So all of these things go hand in hand. They correlate, they relate, and they can really make your total health start to take a nosedive the older we get, because we just don't have the hormones, and we have this chronic stacking effect of stress leading to this dysfunction pyramid.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I think while we're talking about like all the stressors and like all the things it impacts, and it's like, you can't, like you said, you can't get away from all the stress. I think what really is part of the missing key is like counteracting the stressors, right? So like, unfortunately, our food is really deficient in minerals now from the soil
Yeah,
being depleted. Our food sources are low in nutrients. I know you're going to talk about food quality and
yeah,
micronutrients. And when we're under stress or we're inflamed or we're, drinking alcohol or whatever, it requires more micronutrients and more minerals to keep up with those demands.
yeah,
So when we're dieting and under eating and low calorie and then over exercising, demanding more energy output and not sleeping and being emotionally stressed and being inflamed, like it's basically like, the balance, right? Like we're always talking about, like
right.
you can't necessarily remove all the stressors, but what we can do is focus on nourishing your body,
Mhm.
resting, filling up your cup so that it
Yeah,
balances back out
yeah,
and you can be more resilient. Because I think sometimes people think that health practitioners are trying to get everyone to live in a bubble and live in a perfect life. But the real goal is to just balance it out so that
yeah,
you're not running on empty all the time.
yeah.
And I think that's where these stressors become so damaging because there's not those nutrients and those, supportive things in place to help you be more, keep up with those demands, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
It does. A great analogy that I heard somebody use once was a bank account, right? We're born with a certain amount of money in our bank account, and everybody's born with a different amount of money. So you may look at, your friend who runs around like crazy, maybe runs 3 businesses, is exercising all the time, and you're like, huh, she seems like she's fine, right? Maybe she was born with more money in her bank account. Everybody can pull money from that bank account for a certain amount of time, but at some point, if you're not putting anything back in, you're going to be empty. And that's when disease, illness really starts to rear its head. So, like Rebekah was saying, yeah, you're going to have kids, you're going to have a spouse, and all those things can pull from your bank account, but you have to make sure you're doing things like
Hmm.
sleeping, eating well, breathing to put money back into that bank account so that you never get to that dysfunction and disease state.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So sleep. I don't know what's harder for my clients to do, manage their stress or get to bed on time, right? So sleep, again, is a major stressor when we don't get enough of it. And it is so important for things like immune system regulation, your blood pressure, cardiovascular health, longevity, as well as just your overall health. Lack of sleep has profound effects, right? And it's not just Rebekah and I saying sleep because it's important, right? There's so much research that we've listed here that talk about the impact of insufficient sleep. And I think so many women that I talk to, when I ask how many hours are you sleeping, 5 or 6 hours, and they'll say, but I feel great, no issues. I thrive on 5 or 6 hours. In the back of my head, I'm like, it's not possible. Maybe one night you can do okay. But if you every night for however many years, get 7 hours of sleep, you're going to end up at some point in some amount of dysfunction. And you can even see here, if you're on average getting less than 7 hours of sleep per night, you have a 41% higher risk of obesity. That's a big number. If I told you, take this pill and you have a 41% chance of losing a lot of weight, people would take that because that's almost guaranteed, right? So there's a really strong correlation there. Even just if you look at how much is spent on lost productivity and healthcare costs because of lack of sleep, as well as the risk of heart disease, 48% risk of heart disease and 15% of stroke just from chronic sleep deprivation. I know we're heading into cold and flu season. So if you sleep less than 6 hours a night, you're 4 times more likely to catch a cold after exposure to the virus. Again, very important for our teenagers, our kids, and for us if we want to try to stay healthy through this cold and flu season. And this to me is really shocking, and I know can be a little scary. So if anyone's a night shift worker, I'm not trying to scare you, but the World Health Organization classifies night shift work as a probable carcinogen, linking it to cancers with breast and prostate cancer. And I think that's pretty significant and really shows the power of sleep and how it's so restorative and really builds us back when we're taking that time to allow our bodies to do that.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah, it's huge. So I mentioned not just quantity, but quality of sleep matters. So a lot of clients, maybe not a lot, but I do have a handful of clients that they work, they have kids, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm getting 8 hours of sleep." And one pops in my head very quickly. She was, I think we talked about it before, she was a homeschool mom. And so she would put her curriculum together after the kids went to bed. So she was going to bed at like 2 in the morning and sleeping until 10. And she's like, "I'm getting my 8 hours." But she was missing this major window where human growth hormone is produced in the body. So ideally, or human growth hormone is produced primarily between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. So we really need to make sure that you're asleep in a good solid sleep by 11 p.m. So the time you get to bed is just as important as to the amount of hours that you have. So this human growth hormone, if you're not too familiar with it, it happens during that deep sleep. But we want, if you're like, why do I care about human growth hormone? That helps us burn fat. It helps us stimulate tissue growth and build muscle. And next week, we're going to really talk about why muscle matters. So you really want to make sure you're getting that quality sleep window. You also have a decreased immunity if you're not sleeping, because when sleep is compromised, you become more susceptible to those illnesses. Again, we're not repairing our bodies, and we're not setting the stage for our bodies to kick into that immune boosting window. Again, we've just talked about cortisol. So when we sleep, our cortisol rises, and cortisol is catabolic, and catabolism is breaking down. So it's causing our muscles to atrophy and to break down. Cortisol, when it's high, if you remember, also increases fat storage in our abdominal area. So in addition to our daily stress, if we're not sleeping, cortisol is going to rise and it's going to break down our muscle even more. So now we have less muscle and we're adding to our fat. So you become an even worse metabolic place when you are sleep deprived. And then of course, everyone is always concerned about the changes in metabolism, and that's all part of that final cycle, right? Less muscle, more body fat, slower metabolism, as well as thyroid production. So the thyroid absolutely takes a hit when you are under rested.
Yeah, and I've even seen where, and I know you talk about this on the next slide a little bit in some ways, but like that ghrelin hormone,
Yeah,
the hunger hormone,
yeah,
like you actually have more of an appetite when you don't get good sleep. And with the cortisol, like some people, they're like, well, I try to sleep, but I keep waking up.
yeah,
If you don't have stabilized blood sugar,
yeah,
it's going to affect your sleep
yeah,
because cortisol will rise to keep your blood sugar from dipping too low in the night. So that wakes you up. Or if you have urination during the night, like there's different things that we might
yeah,
have to work with you on as
yeah,
practitioners on the underlying root cause of why your sleep isn't as good as it should be. So there can be blood sugar, there can be um, other causes going on there. So we would be happy to dig into
yeah,
those things if you're like, I'm going to bed at 9 or
yeah.
10 and it's not happening. So we can
Yeah.
help you with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the biggest things that I've seen with my clients, in addition to the blood sugar, is that people think, again, they used to be able to do it, but they are, going to work, cooking dinner, cleaning up dinner, probably working again after the kids go to bed, and then they're trying to lay down and go right to bed. So they've just been running on caffeine and cortisol all day and then expecting that switch to flip. And that may have worked when you were younger, but the older we get, it quite often doesn't work. So that's another, in addition to balancing your blood sugar, really taking time to have more of an evening wind down routine.
Transition.
To allow melatonin to rise, cortisol to decrease, and then sleep to get into sleep. Yeah, so that's a great point. But yes, so in addition to the hormonal cascade, like Rebekah was mentioning, there's these other very, very tangible, I'm sure everybody can kind of recognize it, side effects when you are not rested. So when you're tired, I know myself, I'm cranky. I feel tired during the day. But not only do I feel bad, but it's documented, it will influence your food choices because you're tired, right? So when you're tired, your body realizes it needs energy. So it's going to be sending you signals that you need quick energy. And the quickest form of energy is carbs. Nobody's craving a salad when they're tired, right? That's slower released energy. So you're going to crave the bagel, the crackers, the chips, the caffeine. So even if you're like, I don't have time to sleep, I'm not going to sleep, I have really good willpower, it can become very, very difficult because it's not just willpower. It's your body majorly sending you signals that it needs energy to power itself. So it's going to increase your hunger hormone, the ghrelin, and decrease leptin, the satiety hormone. And if you start to pay attention, you'll really, I think, notice it pretty quickly. And you're like, oh, wow, it is very evident. I need to focus on that. Because of that, you can also then get that unstable blood glucose that Rebekah was talking about, which also then makes it really hard to have good willpower. We also see that changes in sleep can affect insulin resistance. And I've read that even just one night of lower sleep can change the next day's insulin sensitivity by up to 33%. And that's a huge number.
And that's from one
One
night.
night, just one night. So imagine what a lifetime or multiple years can do. And I feel like everybody's kind of heard about insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity, but insulin resistance can cause weight gain because it's making it harder for the body to use and store the glucose the way it's supposed to. So it gets stored as excess body fat. So that's why we really care about insulin sensitivity. We want to be sensitive, not resistant. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to get your sleep and then strength train and eat for balanced blood sugar, right? Everything, you'll start to notice
They're
that
all important pillars. Yeah.
they're all pillars. Exactly right. So I think you'll also probably be very aware that cognition is definitely decreased, the ability to learn and focus. And then also further manage your stress due to those cognition issues when you don't have enough sleep. And inflammation, I swear, has been in every slide, every talk that we've given. Inflammation is that immune response. So when we're short on sleep, you produce more cortisol to keep going. Body is in that fight or flight mode. That's a stress response. So that is why inflammation rises. And we want to avoid inflammation as much as possible because you're going to see it in your gut health, with bloating, IBS, thyroid, like the thyroid cascade. It's super important to get your sleep for 1,000 reasons. And those are kind of like the biggest ones that I feel like I see in my clients when they're wondering, I'm doing all the right things. Why am I bloated? Why am I tired? Why can't I control my eating? Why am I eating the right things, but still like crashing at 3 o'clock, right? Because sleep and stress are major pillars of total health. So I also wanted to just touch on that sleep-wake cycle because I think it's really important to talk about the cortisol awakening response. So in the evening, I mentioned the word melatonin. In the evening, our melatonin is supposed to be the highest because that helps us get into sleep. A large part of our daily cortisol comes within the first few hours of awakening. So if you have an odd sleep cycle, that's really going to stress out your body. You may say like we were talking about before, I'm getting my sleep, but I still feel like garbage. And it's probably because you have a weird sleep cycle, to be honest. If you're maybe napping in the afternoon and then trying to get to bed again in the evening, or if you're a night shift worker, or if you are, unfortunately, it happens if your sleep is really disrupted because you have little kids. I know there's not much you can do about it. But just keep in mind that it's really important to maintain that healthy sleep-wake cycle so that your body is prepared to have the melatonin rise. One of the things that helps melatonin rise is the daylight and darkness. So we're very fortunate to have modern technology where we have lights and our house doesn't get dark as the evening progresses. But it's important to try to remember to simulate what our ancestors would have had as much as possible. So if you can, keep your lights a little dim the later the night goes on. Put blue light blockers on your phone if you're going to be watching it, or on your television, and not be in bright daylight and then expect to go to sleep, because your body, the melatonin is going to rise when it sees night coming, and we really need the darkness to have that melatonin rise. And then you sleep and the cortisol will help rise in the morning to wake you up. Okay, so how can you get good sleep? Because like Rebecca was saying, some people, they want to, but they just can't fall asleep. Morning light exposure, that helps set that sleep-wake cycle. And not just like, oh, my windows are open, but if you can, really getting outside in the light, having it hit your eyeballs, no sunglasses on. I know that's difficult, but if you can get ideally 30 minutes, but anything you can get is better than nothing, especially now that it's getting darker. I'm from Pittsburgh. It gets dark around 5 o'clock here. So if I don't get morning sunlight, I'm just kind of done for the day because I'm just exhausted all day long. So it's really helpful if you can get that morning sunlight. It seems basic, but even tapering your liquids in the day so you don't have to wake up to pee, because when you wake up to go to the bathroom, that cortisol is going to start to rise to get you moving. It doesn't realize that it's 3 in the morning and not 7. So if you can avoid having to go to the bathroom, that can also help. Another thing is that people will often say, I'm tapering my liquids, but I still have to go to the bathroom. Quite possibly, you might be short on electrolytes, and you might just be peeing out all the water that you have. So you can experiment with adding electrolytes to your water, and that helps you keep more of the water in your system and not just peeing it all out. Avoiding alcohol. I know a lot of people will say, oh, I can sleep fine with when I have a glass of wine. It helps me relax. I help fall asleep. It may help you feel drowsy, but it does, if you have an Oura ring or anything that tracks your sleep, you can start to notice it will decrease your sleep quality and your restlessness. It also causes more hot flashes, which of course wake people up. If you do experience that, hot flashes at night, you can drink this Montmori tart cherry juice, which can be very beneficial for those hot flashes in the middle of the night. Moving your dinner time up 3 hours before bed also helps with the sleep. You're going to be getting through the main part of your digestion before trying to hit the pillow. And of course, reducing the tech in the evening. I know it's really hard. I myself like to watch like a nice movie on Netflix before I go to bed. But if you're going to do that, at least put either blue light blocking glasses on or on your TV or on your phone screen. And there is a night shift option on the cell phone that it automatically turns on, which can be very beneficial. Manage stress, right? We talked about chronic stress. It does not have to be difficult to manage your stress. Deep breathing is something that is really helpful for overall stress levels. And it can be literally like sitting in your car, no radio on, and breathing in for a count of 4, holding for 4, and exhaling for 4. You don't have to have any special equipment, any special apps, anything special. You can do it wherever you are, wherever you are. The most important thing is just to remember to do it multiple times during the day to help lower your stress levels. Or you could do something more extreme like yoga. I know caffeine can also be very hard for people because it's this vicious cycle, right? You're tired, so you drink caffeine. And because you drank caffeine, it's harder to sleep. So then you're tired the next day. So there can be that weaning period where you're trying to get better sleep and need to dial back on the caffeine. But if you could at least move it up to before 2, I find most people can process the caffeine before they get to bed. It may seem dumb, but even just keeping your room dark, not having a nightlight or cell phones or, TV screens. Some people like fall asleep to the TV and then the TV is kind of on all night. If you can keep that room dark, that's going to signal to your body to increase melatonin so that you can fall asleep and stay asleep. Keeping your room cool, very, very important. Now, this one can go either way. For some of my clients, an evening workout winds them up. But for others, it does help them put them into a more relaxed state. So play around with that one. Again, everybody's different and everybody's body, needs something a little different, but that's one to try if necessary. If you do that, make sure you take a cool shower after so you're not just too hot. There are some supplements that can also help you sleep. And then of course the Oura Ring, if you have money and like to kind of geek out on some of that stuff, can really help show you what your sleep is doing and the sleep quality that you are getting. Okay, so we always love to share client examples. So we had a client who is 65, who came just really looking to optimize her health. She was not overweight by any means, and she thought she was doing what was best for her body, right? So she ate very clean, but when we looked at her initial food log, she ate very low calories, and she was exercising a ton. She said 7+ days a week, and she had a very active job, and just in general, her stress was high, and she was really struggling with daytime fatigue and felt like, I'm doing everything right. I'm eating clean. I'm exercising. Why am I so tired? What can I do to improve? So with her, we ran some some blood work just right off the bat, just to kind of get a baseline of where she was. And you can see, I kind of grabbed some screenshots of the most significant findings from her blood work. And you can see one of the biggest things that popped out here is some blood sugar dysregulation. She also has some increased cardiovascular risk for her levels. They were a little high. We also saw some hypothyroid, likely from a response from her body trying to conserve energy, and maybe some iodine deficiency suspected. We've got excess calcium in the blood, likely some low bone density, excess copper, sorry about that, lack of vitamin K, so all of these things kind of together, probably some mild anemia, and just all these in general nutritional deficiencies. Her urine pH was elevated as well. So, and also some low immune function, GI inflammation, liver stress. So all of that together really was shocking to her because, like we said, she thought she was doing everything right and was surprised to see when we kind of dove in a little bit more, there were some things that we really had to work on optimizing. Rebekah, anything else you want to add on that?
Well, I mean, I think just to point out that like sometimes it's not like the textbook situation for people. And so again, that's where Julie and I's background in analyzing labs and kind of fine-tuning things a little bit per person can go such a long ways. Because if she were to go, to get like your standard assessment, like on paper or visually, she would look healthy. She's doing all the things. She was under eating, but then it's like, I think there's other environmental possibilities as well. So I know like sometimes we start out with just blood work and we see like a baseline of where someone's at. And then it can be, like open up curiosity around, okay, well, why is this such a struggle for your blood sugar? Like, if you're eating enough protein, like let's start with increasing your protein, start with balancing your meals. If we don't get that blood work improved in a few months, well, then let's start looking at your micronutrients. Are you deficient in things like B1, magnesium? Like the thyroid is probably affecting her A1C, like her blood sugar. That's influenced by how well her thyroid's functioning. So as we work on her thyroid and we work on her diet, we should see that A1C improve. But then we're also going to be addressing any deficiencies that could be holding back her insulin sensitivity because there's certain nutrients your body needs to have that healthy glucose insulin process happening. Same thing with her liver, right? We talked last time about liver, and that's so important for how you process your glucose. So, and I know it's not on here, but her AST was a little bit high. So her liver enzyme was a little high. So sometimes it's kind of surprising when people like feel like they're doing all the things, and in some ways this can be discouraging, but for her it was very like she was so glad that she did this because she didn't know, like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
And if we weren't to address these things, it could progress to, bigger problems that we certainly want to avoid if at all possible. So she's just so grateful that like we were able to see so many opportunities, what Julie and I call opportunities for healing, because sometimes like people get bad results and they're like bummed about it. And I'm like, no, this is good. Like we know now what
yeah,
to do to keep you healthy and optimized and like for the long haul.
yeah,
So yeah, I think it's really neat to see like how all these different things can be connected. And it's usually not one thing. Like everyone always wants to say like, oh,
yeah.
I'm hypothyroid.
The
It's
one
my
root
thyroid.
cause,
It's my
yeah,
thyroid. Like
yeah,
blame the thyroid for everything. Or if they're anemic, well, I'm anemic. Like any little I can pick, I'm anemic. Or they'll just blame it on menopause and they'll blame it
yeah,
on perimenopause. Like I think as humans, we want to just blame it all of our problems on one thing. And I think when we start digging into lab work and we start uncovering all these different layers, people are often surprised, like, oh, there's a lot more to this than
yeah,
just hypothyroid. I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
like there's
yeah,
a reason why your thyroid slowed down,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, that's what we're passionate about is like covering all the bases, supporting all the foundations, filling up those, fixing those stress buckets. And that can be multiple stressors, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah. And I think too, for people, I guess speaking from my own experience, when you have the data, it makes the action items so much easier to take action on, right? So
True.
I know when I talk to my clients who are over exercisers, if I were just to say like, hey, we need to dial back your exercise, I'm quite often met with a lot of resistance. But when we can say, look at what's happening to your body inside, then it's like, oh, okay, like I get it now. And I can now make these changes because I can see I have the data to support it. And then we can see the outcomes at the end as well. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
and I've had clients on the other end where they're like, yeah, I knew I was supposed to be eating better. I knew I was supposed to be
yeah,
like exercising. But then seeing their blood work go into like the pre-diabetes range
yeah,
and the parent has
wake up
diabetes and
call.
they see
Yeah,
all the pain they're going through and they're
yeah,
like, I don't want that.
and avoid that.
So yeah, sometimes it really does help to see it on
Yeah,
paper.
yeah, absolutely. And of course, the fun part, right? Once we have all that data, what did we do with her? So again, very similar pillars that we work everyone through, just tweaked for her needs. So really, like blood sugar is going to be a big focus for her. So making sure she's eating for stable blood sugar and moving for stable blood sugar. So over exercising does not help blood sugar, but short walks after a meal does. So making minor tweaks in her day like that really can help move the needle on her blood sugar results. With her, we also eliminated gluten and dairy and then increasing calories and increasing protein. So it's not always about taking away or doing more, right? So for some people, we may need to increase calories, increase protein, and dial back on exercise. Very important for everyone to focus on their detox to make sure that that her detox pathways are open, hydration, sweating, eliminating toxins. And then, like we mentioned, really pulling back on her exercise, both quantity and intensity. Temporarily, right? Once she gets to a more stable place, if she enjoys the HIIT type workouts, yeah, you can add one or two. But it's about we need to rebuild and restore before we can start taxing the body again. Stress management, no surprise, huge, right? Supporting the liver, grounding, dry brushing, looking at toxins, creating white space. It seems so simple. It almost seems silly that to put it on a slide, but it is such a big dial mover for people who have the similar type labs that she had, right? Sleep, of course, very important. And then using supplementation strategically to fill in those nutritional gaps that we identified, as well as to support her blood sugar. And then, like we talked about before, right? This is one case study, and we've really shared a lot of information. But what you do with it is the most important thing. Our goal was for you to be able to take this information and take action from it. We didn't want it to be vague. And so our goal is that you can learn something from these and really take action. But if you're like, hey, I really want to dive deeper, to be able to look at what's going on under the hood. Rebekah and I are super excited about this new program, this Nourish and Thrive program, where we will be working with people both one-on-one and in a group setting to achieve maximal health. And then whatever outcome you're looking for, that might be weight loss, that might be weight gain, that might be more stable energy, that might be adding muscle. And we really want to be able to support you in that in whatever capacity that you need. We've talked about before that some people need a lot of intense one-on-one accountability. They want the labs, they need the labs, they want to be able to touch base with somebody every week to be able to adjust that protocol. And they to ask the questions and to seek that guidance and support so that they can always move forward. And those people will do really well in that one-on-one program. And then there's some other people who just need to know what to do and maybe want that group support, a couple of touch points a month in a group setting to be able to ask their questions. And they know they can execute if they just have a plan in front of them. And those people would do really well in the group program. So we really tried to make it that there's something for everybody. Education is a huge component of our program, as well as health, longevity, really making sure that you feel empowered to not only complete the program, but then to be able to take that knowledge and execute for the rest of your life so that it's not just something you did once, but it's something that you learned and that becomes essentially your new identity so that you can continue on that very healthy lifestyle. And we have a lot of information on the website. So if you hop over, it'll talk about the different programs. It talks about the costs of each. But I'm here, Rebekah's here. If you have any questions, feel free to email either one of us because we really want to support you in whatever capacity you need.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for going through all of that. I feel like that was a really big topic, and I feel like we kind of broke it down into a lot of actionable steps and practical advice. And I know, when we're talking about general health, like there's only so much we can go over, and working one-on-one with people, we can really dive
Yeah.
into what's holding you back. Because you might have
Yeah.
looked at some of those slides and been like, well, I'm doing all of those things and I'm still struggling. That's where you might want to reach out to us directly and have a consultation and us really dive into what could be holding it back for you,
Yeah.
because it might be different for other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're more than happy to dive in deeper than these what we've shared today. But we obviously, check out our website, reach out to us, and let us know if there's any way that we can help you with this process. So we're ready to go if you are. So thank you for today, and we will talk to you next time.